Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of How to Leave a Cult. I am your host, Brooke Walker, and How to Leave a Cult is a podcast about my biography and my experience growing up in a cult for over 25 years. And specifically, the church was called the Church of Immortal Consciousness. It was ran by Trina and Stephen Camp. Trina was a trance medium, and she tranced a spirit who was also the one who led most things, and his name was Dr. Duran. This is going to span pretty much 25 years of my life, and it goes into everything between fighting with neighbors, lawsuits that occurred over the years, run-ins with different legal situations, arranged marriage, my arranged marriage, bodyguards, emotional abuse, control, alcoholism, speaking with a spirit. And if you're new here, then that's what you're getting into. You can start from the beginning, you can jump in now, totally up to you. But so, little recap on last week. So, last episode, one of the big things that I talked about is why people don't leave cults. But I also shared, and at this point, I'm still about 16 years old, but I've been getting questions and getting feedback, negative feedback as well, about people leaving. And so I went into depth and explained that. The other thing that I talked about last week was an incident where I had actually gotten poisoned. And there was a couple members during the time that had, which was believed from going to the bar and having drinks, things put in drinks and stuff like that. That would not have been what had happened to me because I was a teenager and I wasn't going to bars. So I never did find out where. But if you're interested, you can go check out that episode. So this week I want to talk a little bit about, back into the story of where we were at. The bodyguards had come, and so they were there at this time, and things were volatile. But I also want to talk about like the lore of the spirit, specifically Dr. Duran, and how people came and then stayed because of feeling attracted to the way that they were treated and the things that the spirit would say to them. And I was thinking about how to talk about this today, and I think that like whether you believe in going to psychics or not, or you have an interest in it, I want you to think that if you went to a psychic today, what kind of questions would you ask? And that was what going to trance was like. It was people coming in and asking questions about their life, and feeling like it was coming from somebody who was giving them something that came from a higher power, right? It was, the idea behind it was that this person was speaking who had this direct connection to God. And the way that it was always explained when I was young growing up was like that he would come through and that he was speaking directly to my guides and teachers. And my guides and teachers could be a combination of family members that have passed or angels or guardians that are helping to lead me through my life on a day-to-day basis. And Duran, when we would go to a trance and we would ask Duran a question, who was trancing through Trina, he would specifically talk to our guides, teachers, and the people that were there to support us and give us guidance from them. So the basis of it sounded really neat. And, sometimes you think you might ask profound things, but a lot of times people are asking day-to-day stuff, health stuff. And so sometimes if people had health ailments, he would give ways to fix those or heal those and stuff like that. And it was very, what do they call them? They call them castor oil packs and dietary things, Um, and then people would ask about relationship advice, and he would tell them different things about their relationship. And he would talk to people about um, work and business and give them advice on that. Then that would all go back to in-person stuff when it would come to meetings and processes where you would then get in front of the teachers, and then they would kind of enforce different things around whatever Duran had said. Duran was the overriding factor, though. Even the teachers would not override Duran. But I did feel there were definitely times that what came through Duran may have been assisted, maybe, I would say. Not everything, but definitely there were times over the years. So, and I think that, so part of one of the things that happened being in the cult as long as I was and growing up in it from a little kid, I'm basically told that I need to do what I'm told by the Spirit. And if I follow what the Spirit tells me to do, that my life will be better for it. And I will not have to go through the pain and the anguish and the mistakes that my parents have made. Like, that was one of the main things that were said to all of us as children. It was like, if you do this, then this is the promise of the gift that you're going to get from it. And so I believed that. Even as a teenager, I had believed that if I went along with things. And, you know, from a very young age, and I want to say I was like 9 years old, I remember sitting in a trance, and I was not in a lot of trances when I was that young because they were often more for adults than young children. But from a very young age, I remember sitting in a trance one time where Duran said I was going to be a medium. And so he said that I would someday trance and I would take over to some degree. Now, when I say that I feel like things were manipulated, I have never felt something that felt so empty for me. And it was preached to me over the years, and I was told many times, like, waiting for this experience to happen, right? And I was told that I need to go meditate more. And I didn't really understand what meditating is. I didn't know what that meant. So I'm trying to meditate, not really knowing what meditation is. But what I'm doing is I'm going to the trance room and I'm sitting quietly, and I would sit for 30 minutes or I'd sit for an hour, which is really hard, by the way. If you've ever tried to meditate that long, it takes a long time. But I would do what I was told. And, you know, I probably, and like, the way that I was told to do these things was so dysfunctional. And I thought that Trina was going to teach me something that was going to help me understand what I would do and how this was at some point going to happen. Because for her, it seemed like it was something that was very natural that had just occurred for her. She had been told when she was, she hadn't been told. Duran came to her when she was a kid, apparently, and came and spoke to her. And I'm not sure if it was real life or a dream, but came and spoke to her and told her that this was a gift of hers and this was an agreement that they had with each other. So I was always under the assumption that I would somehow have that. I would have some experience that introduced me to it. And it was another way that I felt like a failure all the time, because I was always thinking that this is supposed to happen at any moment. And especially with all of the meditating and stuff that I was doing. And I went in and out of it, but like the amount that I would actually meditate over the years. The other thing is I also knew who Trina was trained by. And so Trina was trained by a man named Richard Ireland. And he was incredibly gifted. Like, you could pull a bill out of your pocket, like a 1, a 10, a 20, $100 bill. Didn't matter what it was. You could pull any bill out of your pocket, and he he could read the serial number off of it blindfolded. And he would do this in public trances that he would do. He would do phenomena mediumship, which he would do like blindfold billets. And some of them even, like, people would put messages, they would write messages, stick them in a box, and some of them would get read and answered, and without having ever read them, and having no idea who wrote them either. Like, they were not long and in detail. And my understanding is the answers were incredibly amazing. And the other thing that he would do, and I never experienced this because I was very young when he was around, so I never went to any of his trances, but there was something called a horn, and it was this big, long, huge, and I'm doing this, it's not this long, it's way longer, but I probably almost 3 feet long, but you could get different sizes of them, but it was a horn, and it would float around the room, and apparently other voices would come out of it. And so that was, and I don't know if there's still mediums who do that kind of stuff, but he did like phenomenal things. And so Trina was supposedly trained from him. So I think that I'm supposed to be doing some version of any of this. Now, Trina's so much older by the time this is going on. And so I think that it's going to happen at some point. I'm going to have some revelation. I'm going to have some experience. I'm going to have some like come to fucking Jesus type of moment. You know what I mean? Like, all of a sudden it's going to hit me, and I am just waiting and feeling like maybe there's something going on. And I remember this just feeling of complete emptiness, because here I am, and I'm supposed to be this trance medium, and nothing comes to me. And at the same time, like, this is going on over the years. I mean, as a teenager, like I shared last episode, I was working full time, getting up to no good with my friends on the weekends as much as we could, but we always got in trouble for it too. And, you know, it just was this strange experience, right? And there's always all this other stuff going on. There's always 100 things going on, right? At the same time, we have the school that's on this whole journey, and, you know, the bodyguards are there. There's all this protective stuff going on. There's threats. There's these lawsuits. I'm working at the law office in the middle of a lot of these lawsuits. And so, you know, there's just, and then there's kids, and any given day there's, you know, a process about 8 different things. So I'm kind of waiting for life to happen in different ways, and waiting for the things that I'm told to do at any given time, and then just kind of going through the motions, I think, like we do. But it's stressful. It's incredibly stressful. And the way that everybody deals with it at the time is through drinking and smoking. Unless you were pregnant, you were probably drinking and smoking all the time. Almost everybody smoked. And I would say probably everybody drank. And if you weren't drinking, you probably didn't fit in that well, because it was just an expectation of how things were. So I don't know exactly when and how it began to change, at what point they decided they didn't need the bodyguards or couldn't afford the bodyguards because they were really expensive. And I kind of shared like how poor things were. Like, everybody else is getting boxes of food delivered to their door, but they're doing special grocery shops to be able to feed the bodyguards at the time. But at some point that began to shift, and the bodyguards become members. And I don't know that it was like full-blown members of the church, but they began to move in. So Brian moves in, and then Scott, he moves into a house, and then his girlfriend comes, And so they were living in one of the houses. They were living in a house in the valley. I don't know that they ever really lived up in the Payson area, but they were living in one of the valley homes that were in Mesa. Brian moved to Payson, and Brian actually starts dating Jessica, Trina and Steven's youngest child. And she was my bestie. And I mean, I think she had to be like 15. And Brian had to be 24. He could have been 27. I don't know. But Trina and Steven always married their children off to men who were much older. That was a standard. Marlo's husband was 20 years older. Shelby's husband was 20 years older. Summer's husband was, I think he's only like 8 or 9. And then the son's different, but the daughters always married to older men. And I think that was somewhat on purpose for financial security. Like, looking back, everybody was financial security based. So Brian and Jessica start dating, and we hang out with them. Sometimes Brian had a friend who would occasionally come visit, and then Thanksgiving comes around, and his brother's coming to visit. And so I thought really nothing of it at the time. I believe by then I was living with my sister and a couple other women, and we were all excited and just cooking together. We're all just cooking and making dinner for Thanksgiving, and we're excited. And I think with one of the women we lived with, her name was Jennifer, and she had gotten this whole dish set, like a really beautiful dish set. So we were kind of having fun and making a really fancy Thanksgiving with all of us and everybody's kids. And get a phone call. It's halfway through the day, in the middle of cooking, and it's like, Brooke, you need to get over here right now. You need to come to Trina and Steven's house and put your makeup on because Brian's brother is here and you need to come meet him. I'm a little speechless talking about it because it's still like just blows my mind. And by then, every friend I have is in a relationship. And there's the part of me that is wanting to be in a relationship. I think I had just had my 17th birthday. And so, and I'm a virgin. So I want to be in a relationship, but at the same time, like, the idea of being called over to meet Brian's brother was something different than I was expecting, for sure. And just being told to like stop everything I'm doing on Thanksgiving because none of that's important because I need to go meet him. And so I don't remember if I got makeup on and changed or if I already had it on, but I go over to Trina and Steven's house, and Jessica's there with Brian, obviously. And then his brother is there. And I remember meeting him, and I just remember thinking, like, I mean, to explain Colin, and I want to do it as respectfully as possible, but to explain Colin, I was 17, he was 19 at the time, and it wasn't fireworks. I would say that he was fine. And I wish I could say a lot more than that. But at the time, I'm doing what I'm told to do. And I'm like, okay, so I meet him. I think we hang out. So later that night, we all hang out and drink because that's what we always did. And I remember chatting with him, and I don't think it was like any kind of major fireworks or anything like that. I had heard his backstory from Brian. Like, I knew about it from Jessica. I knew that he had stolen a lot of cars over the years. I knew that he had followed Brian down from where they lived. I knew that they had a lot of stuff with their parents. So, and I knew he worked for some guy and there was a lot of drug stuff involved. So all of this stuff is not exactly screaming to me like, hey, this is definitely somebody you should, you know, think about marrying. But at the same time, like, that's not, none of that stuff matters because I'm in this cult, and so you just kind of go along with what you're told to do. And I've seen these women before me who have been ripped to shreds if they didn't go along with what they were told to do. And I know that the expectation, and it's funny or manipulated, whatever way you want to call it, is a month or so prior, I'm in a public trance. And when it's a public trance, that means, anybody and everybody could be there. It's whoever decided to show up that day. So it could be a room of 50 people. And so I'm in one of these trances, and Duran says to me, just out of the blue, he says to me, you need to go have sex and you have permission to go have sex. And I'm 17. I've never dated because I haven't been in school for fucking years, right? And it's like, oh, okay, I don't know what to do with that information. Like, it's not like there's somebody that I've gotten to know that, and the funny thing is like a week later, I remember I had gone to the Valley with my dad, the law office, and I get back after like a weekend or whatever, and I remember Marlo, who's a minister, she like calls me like it's this juicy gossip, and she's like, well, did you have sex with somebody? And I was like, what the fuck do you mean? Like I just am overflowing with options, and I'm just going to go, I've been told my whole life that I should never have sex with anybody, that it's only something I'm ever supposed to share with my like vibration. And now you guys are thinking I'm just going to go fuck the first person that I fucking find? Like, that's not the way things work. It was the most like mind-blowing thing. Plus, I'm seeing people ripped to shreds regularly about their sexual this and their sexual that. But Marlo was a particularly cruel fucking cunt too. So the way that she would come across on things was just abrasive. I can just call her just utterly abrasive. So Colin, me and him had talked, and he was going home, and he asked me out on a date. And so we set up, I gave him my phone number, and we were going to go out on a date. And probably next time I was down in the Valley, since he lived in, Phoenix Mesa area, somewhere around there. And I was excited about the idea of dating, and seeing where it went. But I didn't jump in the bed with him either. And so next thing I know, days went by, and Colin is moving to be closer to his brother. And so he is joining the church. And also, there's nowhere else for him to live, so he's moving into my house. And he's going to live in the bedroom that my brother's living with, my brother's in, because it's the boys' bedroom. And so they're going to share a bedroom with whatever other boys live with us. And I couldn't tell you who it was. And I remember how disappointing that was. Now he's moving, and that's what's happening, is that he is moving in. And so now there goes the ability to even go on dates. So when we got together, I mean, we didn't even really date. Like there was no fun, like, get to know each other. There was no wooing. It just all of a sudden was. And, we got together, and then we would hang out and drink. And next thing I knew, very shortly into our relationship, I was all of a sudden responsible for him. So immediately when he moves up, I am taken to and told that I need to explain to him what needs to happen now, how he needs to give his money over, and how he needs to give. So there was a video library, because that was the thing at the time, was videos, like VHS tapes. And so whatever movies he had to give over to the library. And if he wanted to get a movie out of the library, he could. You could rent them out from the library, but he had to donate all of his to the library. So it's like this, like, disseminating all your belongings, and then you're going to give your money, and then you're going to be taken care of, and you don't have to pay rent. You just have to work. And so now he's working for the construction business, and he has to get up and leave at 5 a.m. or whatever time it was. And then because he had a background of drugs, and they want to make sure that he gets off drugs, and the best way to get people off drugs, because they're fucking experts on this, is to make sure that he has enough alcohol to substitute his pot smoking habit. So it's now my responsibility as a 17-year-old girl to make sure that he has a case of beer so he can have something to drink on a regular basis, pretty much every night. And so whatever fantasy I had about getting in a relationship, my first relationship, or having a husband, that was the reality I was dealt. And it was the way that it was at those times. And I wasn't the only one. I was one of the few that had somebody who came from outside. A lot of everybody else grew up with each other, so at least they knew each other. And I can't imagine what he was thinking, except for the fact that I know that he came from trauma. He came from a mom who had bipolar issues. He had been really young when his brother left, and I know that he got in a lot of trouble stealing cars. I know that the man that he was living with was dealing drugs, and him at 18 years old was given a gun and said, I'm going into this house, and if I don't come out, then I want you to time it. If I'm not out in 5 minutes, you come in shooting. So I mean, he was out of the frying pan and into the fryer. At least there was none of that kind of stuff going on, which is a very low bar. Sorry. I deflect. So one of the problems that happens, and I'm going to leave that to that's the end of the story today. I will dive more into my brand new relationship next week. But one of the things that happens in a cult is this power dynamic. And religions do this a lot, where they tell you what you need to do and tell you how to do it instead of giving you the tools. But what happens as a member is you also you have to play the other role in that. So there's somebody who's has the power and is implementing all the rules, but that only works if you have somebody who's submissive and allows it. When you're growing up in that, the other side of not being submissive means that you're going to be beaten into submission. You're going to be abused into submission. So it becomes a point where you kind of start to go along with things because you don't have another option. And you, on top of that, are promised that if you do so, that this is all that you're going to have. So I'm under the belief that me doing these things is going to save me for the pain that my parents have gone through. I think that if I get in a relationship with this person that I'm thinking that at some point I can grow to love, that if I can grow to love this person, that I'm going to have a relationship so much better than the relationship that my parents have, and that I'm going to be able to have children, and that we are going to be together for the rest of our lives, and that this is ordained from God. Like, God's the one who came down and is putting this relationship with me and this man together. So to me, I'm thinking that, yes, this seems really difficult, but it's going to be so much better in the long run because I'm going to have all these different things that are going to be better, and we're going to be spiritual, and we're going to be, like, just fucking bullshit. Like, brainwashing bullshit. But it's all around this teaching that I've been told my entire life is the reality. And I will say, the power dynamic, when you give your power away, the thing about giving your power away is that there is a feeling of like, well, this is great. I don't have to make these decisions. Somebody else is making them for me. And you get to a point that you just become really good about following what you're told to do. And it's really easy just to follow what you're told to do rather than figure out how to make your own decisions, because when you're young, you haven't necessarily solidified all this stuff inside about your choices and the things you want. So it's easier to go along with it. I would say people who came in older might have had a more difficult time, but I'm just still under this, fucking veil of crazy thinking that this has a higher purpose for me. And the biggest problem is that you become a victim to these decisions because they're not your decisions. And when they're not your decisions, then you are left trying to clean up things you never wanted in the first place. And that is really hard. Undoing things that never came from you and were never in your heart to choose is a very difficult thing. And the only way that you can do that is to find the gift and find the silver lining in how everything came down. And finding a way to own those types of things, which is very difficult when you didn't choose them and you were in a situation of religious abuse. And what I would recommend is start with the smallest thing. Start with the things in your life that are it's like lifting a weight. You cannot lift a 200-pound weight if you haven't even gotten yourself to lifting the 100-pound weights. And you may not be able to lift the 100-pound weights if you can't lift the 50. And if you can't lift the 50, maybe you need to start with 25. So if you've had a really large amount of religious abuse, you need to start with something that's easy. You can't just immediately go, I can forgive and I can forget and I can see a blessing on all of this. You have to start with something really small. So what is the smallest thing right now in your life that you can see a blessing in? And then slowly, as you get stronger and you get better at seeing blessings in your life, you can begin to pick more difficult ones and you can lift heavier weights. Start with a 1-pounder if you need to. And then you can go from there. So, I hope you guys have enjoyed today. We will be back next week to dive into my relationship and other things that happened during that time. So, and me and my soon to be arranged marriage. I'm not trying to make light of it all, but sometimes you have to laugh about things, and laughter is a little bit of a cure. I have taken it very seriously, and sometimes laughing just helps me to get through it. So hopefully you guys understand that. Have an amazing day. Please like, share, follow wherever you're listening this. I'd love a 5-star review, and we'll see you guys soon. Bye-bye.